Greetings and salutations. You've successfully arrived at the Bloody Disgusting Network. The passage of time will now bring you to something strange, unique, and idiosyncratic. Have a good time.
Greetings, constant listeners. It's Michael Monroeville Mall Rothman. So today we're unlocking, I guess you could call it a book episode, because technically it is a book, and it's a book that Stephen King released 35 years ago. It's called Nightmares in the Sky, Gargoyles and Grotesques. It's a coffee table book, like in Seinfeld. Remember the whole coffee table book? Yeah, anyway. Well, King and F. Fitzgerald put it together way back in 1988. And you know what? We missed it. I guess the coffee table wasn't on our radar, but look, shit happens. But we did cover it because the Dans, you know them as Dan Pfleegor and Dan Caffrey, they covered it in the Barrens way back in 2021. And it's a great episode. They talk all about the impetus behind the project, King's essay within, the countless photos within. And they also stay on theme by talking about Stan Winston's 1972 telefilm, Gargoyles. Now, if you know Caffrey, you know that Caffrey loves a good old creature feature. He loves the monsters of the night. And Pfleegor loves rules when it comes to lore. So the two of them seem to be a perfect match for this. And we thought this would be a nice little buffer. You know, when you unlock something, you get something, a nice little holiday treat. This month is the season of giving, right? Well, we're giving you this episode, and oh my God, in less than a week, we are giving you another book episode, our first of 6 tied to 11/22/63. So these are good times. These are good times. Of course, if you enjoy an episode like this, you can get even more of them, even more book episodes actually over in the Barrens, www.patreon.com/thebarrens, because we've got hours and hours of exclusive content we haven't unlocked, hundreds of hours, maybe thousands of hours. I don't know. We'll have to do the math on that one. But we've got King commentaries for all your favorite movies. We've got our in-depth archival series where we talk about uncollected works and essays and everything under the King umbrella that we haven't covered already on the podcast. The Dans have their own Dark Tower Detour series. We've got monstrosities. We've got a lot of stuff in there, okay? I mentioned book episodes, and we do have book episodes in there. We've got one for Holly. We've got one for Fairy Tale. We've got one for Billy Summers, and also Gwendy's Final Task. So if you want to jump ahead on the path of the beam, you can listen to us talk about those newer episodes, and we're going to keep doing that. We'll probably have a new one for You Like It Darker next year, and I'm sure a lot of people will get angry and say, well, why isn't this in the feed? And it will be in the feed, but the main feed is chronological, and we wanted to jump ahead for our lovely patrons, and they are lovely, and they all do gather around 24/7 on our Discord, which is also part of our patrons exclusivities. But anyway, I'm rambling. You want to get to Gargoyles, so start looking up at the sky. Hopefully they're not looking down at you, and stay safe, and we'll be seeing you over long days and pleasant nights.
My friendship to all of you precludes my involvement with any one of you. But if you wanna make love, then I do too, and I'll be right there behind you. All in the name of oh, all in the name of oh, all in the name of
Greetings, constant listeners, and welcome to the Losers Club, part of the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network. We are in for a treat today. It's a little bit of an unusual episode because we don't usually review coffee table books, but Stephen King, the horror master, saw fit to do it in 1988. Let me say first, this is Dan Gargoyle Pfleegor. I couldn't really think of a good nickname, but I was watching Jurassic Park earlier. Dino DNA, so today I'm a gargoyle. And who am I joined by down there in Atlanta?
Man, and I'm trying to think of a pun. This book. I mean, there's only a few pages of King text in this book, so it's hard to come up with a proper name. I will say, I am. Oh man, what's like a stone that begins with D? I'm trying to think.
Diamond.
I'm Dan Diamond Caffrey, because maybe if you
Ooh.
polish a gargoyle, it will turn into a diamond or something like that.
It sounds like a gambler's name.
Yeah,
Dan the Diamond.
Yeah, a wrestler or something. There's got to be. I'm sure if I went through the book, or if I went through the movie that we're going to talk about today too, or maybe I could have on the Disney show Gargoyle. I could, I'm Dan Disney's Gargoyles Caffrey. There we go.
Nice save.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, like we were saying, so this is a little bit of an unusual episode because this is more of an essay from King. It's only about 35 pages long, and it accompanies photos by F. Fitzgerald, who took pictures, about 100 pages so, of gargoyles all across America. And what we're doing is also pairing this with the 1973 movie, made-for-TV movie, or 72?
In 72, yeah.
72.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a Primetime Emmy Awards. It was in 1973 where it won some awards. But 1972, where Cornell Wilde starred, directed, wrote in the made-for-TV classic Gargoyles, which gets mentioned quite a few times in the book.
So I had a question about this, actually, because King said, that's what King says. He says, he starred, directed in it, and wrote it. But I looked it up. I think he only starred in this one. He like, there were other movies that he did do that with, but I was like kind of confused on that. I didn't know if King was getting his facts wrong, or if maybe just not all the information was on the internet. I don't know though. Because on Wikipedia, I think it says it was here. I'm gonna look this up real quick just to make sure I'm not.
Wikipedia, they just make up anything.
Yeah,
just like,
yeah, exactly.
I remember when that used to be like a cliche.
Yeah, no,
it's
I know.
written by
Now
people. It's like unlike encyclopedias. But
I was gonna say too. Wikipedia is a pretty reputable source now. Yeah, let me just double check. Yeah, because on Wikipedia it says screenplay by Stephen Karpf and Eleanor Karpf, directed by Bill Norton and starring Cornell Wilde. But then I looked up, Cornell Wilde was like a famous made-for-TV director in the 70s. So I don't know. Choose your own adventure, I guess.
We'll get into it, yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, yes. Don't you see? Don't you see how clear it all is? Not only can you see the future, I can change it. You can change it, exactly.
But let's start with the book first of all. So just, I guess I'll ask you because I know you have the actual hard copy of the book. When did you get it? What edition is it?
So this is the first edition, baby, as I do. Here, I'll show it on Zoom. Not that you can't see this at home, folks, but trust that I'm showing my good friend Dan Pfleegor what this book looks like. So I actually got this at a yard sale probably about a decade ago. A theater company that I was affiliated with in Chicago was having a sale because they were moving spaces. And my friend who runs it, Adam Webster, he had a ton of Stephen King books for sale, first editions like It. And I think, let's say Lissy's Story, a few other ones. And then he had this and he was like, oh, do you want this one too? And I never heard of it before, but I figured it was Stephen King. Okay, I would take it. I would wager to say most King fans haven't heard of it. It's strange because it's classified as a King book, but like you said, it's more of a photo coffee table book with an introductory essay about gargoyles. And honestly, I didn't read it. I mean, I'd always flip through it as you do with coffee table books. I didn't read it in full until we knew we were going to record this. So I'm still a little fresh with the material. But what about you? What was your first experience with it?
So this actually, I've been going through the Stephen King checklist and trying to get current with all the books. So this was the one I stumbled upon in 1988. And said, you know what, I need to actually go ahead and check this out. I know a few of my friends have the actual coffee table edition. I found a different edition. Let's leave it at that. But apparently they published 250,000, and I think they only sold about 100,000 of them initially, which is kind of interesting. And then the more I was reading too, so this was in 1988. This was the only book that Stephen King had published. Apparently there was the Gunslinger Trade Edition came out, but this was the only book, new book that had come out that year in 1988.
The only new King material. So is mine worth a bunch of money then, you think?
That's a good question. It's definitely a collector's item because I don't know how popular it is. And I can't imagine that many other Stephen King books only have 250,000 printed editions.
Yeah, I was just reading today about there was that coffee table book Madonna did, which is called Sex. Apparently it's really rare.
Vanilla Ice.
Yeah. And so maybe Naomi Campbell, all these people in it. So maybe this is like the Madonna Sex of Stephen King books that I have right here in my hand.
I just always think of Seinfeld where Kramer makes the coffee table book that becomes a coffee table.
Oh yeah, like unfolds with the little legs, right? And he goes on a talk show for it.
He goes on Regis and Kathy Lee. Yeah.
I think that's how I found out what a coffee table book was. I don't think I knew what it was before that.
Yeah, I've always thought that was a weird term because I have a few coffee table books, but I hate having clutter on my table. When
I was going to say my grandmother has some New Jersey history books on her various coffee tables, and she's a really good decorator, so it looks good. But for the most part, yeah, I don't think any of my friends have actual books on their tables. Yeah, that's where you eat. You don't want that cluttering up. You don't want a bunch of gargoyles staring back at you. Like that.
I have the H.R. Giger Necronomicon, which is very disturbing.
Yeah, that's good to have on your table for it.
Special guest, but we should talk about the structure of this book.
Look at me. Look at me, teacher.
It's really an essay. There's a little bit of, I guess, like a postmodern take from King, because it's an essay about him being approached to write an intro for a book about gargoyles. So it's kind of feeding into itself and giving this sort of meta narrative of the process of him embracing being accepted to do something a little bit that's outside of his wheelhouse. What did you think about that?
Yeah, it was interesting because right off the bat, he says, I'm not going to give a history lesson about gargoyles. I mean, there's all sorts. I mean, you could write, I'm sure there are entire books or theses written about the evolution of what a gargoyle is, how it plays into architecture. I'm sure there's some Renaissance business in there, right? But yeah, he makes kind of his angle at the very beginning. I'm just going to talk about this from a standpoint of terror, from why I chose to do this. And for him, he looked up in when his friend talked about gargoyles, he looked up in the sky and really saw them for the first time. He says that, we, as pedestrians, we don't look up a lot, which is very true. And he had never really noticed a lot of these gargoyles. I think it's on Madison Avenue. He's talking about New York specifically. And this is something I wanted to ask you, actually. So he talks about being terrified by them, which makes sense because it's Stephen King and it's horror. Do you think he laid on the terror a little thick, though? Like I just pictured him riding around in a limo, just being petrified by these stone statues. And I don't know if I quite buy that. I like the writing a lot, but I was wondering, like, okay, how scared was he really of this? What do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't know. It is. I think it's one of those things where he wasn't aware of how many gargoyles there actually are. And one of the guys, Mark Glimcher, famously says something like, "We don't see them, but they see us." So I think that concept maybe stuck in his craw of like, oh, that's a cool idea for a horror that,
Yeah,
so
that's
Stephen
true,
King toured around, who knows how scared he actually was. But I think he'll kind of like tug on that thread, pull the yarn off that sweater and see how far it'll take him.
Totally.
So
Yeah. I think he did. I mean, and that's why I said, like, obviously I think the writing is actually quite beautiful and how he talks about them being demons and staring down and all that. And I like what you said too. I mean, I remember I would ride the L train in Chicago and around the loop. And there's some great pictures of Chicago here, of gargoyles in Chicago. And every now and then I would look up on one of those stretches kind of between Chicago and Franklin and Merchandise Mart and Quincy, where you're really surrounded by buildings. And every now and then I would look up and note and go, oh, I never noticed that building had a gargoyle before. And it was this sort of jolt of surprise. And yeah, I think you're right. He's obviously amplifying that a little bit, I think. So he can give people the willies, as he's wont to do.
He's just like, Tabby, I need to come home.
Yeah. Just picture of like, I don't know, there's that old Tim and Eric sketch of that old man being afraid of all these creatures that don't exist, like the Bowl, which is a bat and an owl, and they just show him like having the covers all the way up to his nose and trembling. I just picture Stephen King looking like that about gargoyles. But I mean, overall, yeah, I agree though. I do really like the conceit of the essay of, okay, this isn't a history lesson. I'm just going to give my very personal take on gargoyles. And I actually had no idea that he reveals this in the essay, that the word gargoyle actually comes from gullet, because I guess a true gargoyle has to have a water spout coming out of its mouth. They were used as essentially as fancy as cover-ups for water gutters on big buildings. And I don't know. I think I could be wrong. I think a lot of the gargoyles that F. Stop Fitzgerald ends up photographing for this, I think a lot of them technically aren't true gargoyles because they don't have the water spout. But that was interesting. I didn't know that was where the word came from, or that's what made them truly distinct as an architectural feature.
Yeah, what was it? French for gullet, right? Is that?
Yeah, I think it was French. Yeah, for gullet. It's
and they're placed in the cornice, which is another word that I learned for architecture. The cornice is sort of like the molded edge of the building. Oh
yeah, like it's almost like it almost looks like the top of a column extending all the way around a building, kind of.
Yeah, like a Doric column or something.
What's your experience? Because I actually liked Gargoyles a lot growing up. I would, maybe you remember that there's some store in Gulfview Square Mall that sold a bunch of like dorky fantasy stuff, but you could buy Gargoyle bookends.
Exactly what I was going to say. Bookends. For some reason, I always saw Gargoyle bookends.
Yeah, I think I could be wrong. Back when we had the Losers Club was based in like a sound studio in an office. I had Gargoyle bookends that when we moved to Austin, I actually just gave to Rothman, and so he probably has them somewhere. But they were sort of holding. I still
see them when I go to his place.
Nice, yeah. So they were holding. So a little Losers Club trivia. Many of our Stephen King books are held up by these gargoyle bookends, but I guess they technically wouldn't be gargoyles because they don't have the gullet. But I think when we hear gargoyle, we think stone statue of some kind of demon or animal, right? I mean, I think that's what.
Yeah. Well, I always thought it had to be by strict definition like a winged demon.
Yeah.
But going through this book, it seems like there's a lot that are more humanoid or like a bat with dragon wings. So it seems like the definition is a little looser than
there's somewhere they're like chimpanzees. I mean, I guess if they have that pipe coming out of their mouth, that's that's what it means. Yeah. Were you into I mean, I think I know the answer because I've seen your childhood bedroom. That sounds creepy, but what
you still see it?
Yeah, yes, every night. Did you have any gargoyle collections or anything like that, or did you keep them in your room at all?
I never really had any straight up gargoyles, but my little brother watched the cartoon show.
Disney's
Steve
Gargoyles.
And Frank and Steve, they both watched it. So we actually had some of the action figures, and I wasn't like a regular viewer, but I used to step in and watch it. And I think it was like Keith David who did the voice of the main guy.
Yeah, Keith David. I think Ed Asner did the voice of the old one. Actually, you know what? Little King's Dominion here. Bill Fagerback, who voices Tom Cullen, M.O. and Moon, not voices. He plays Tom Cullen in the original Stan miniseries. He is the voice, I think, of. Oh gosh, there's Hudson, Lexington, Brooklyn, Bronx. Oh man, he was like the chubby gargoyle. What was his name? Do you remember? He's like the chubby, goofy one.
I'm not. Maybe
I'm gonna look this up. I hope I'm not getting this wrong because let's see. But he was on. I mean, he has like one of those huge IMDb pages too. So he's got. Okay, here we go. So he is. Oh man, am I totally wrong about this? I can't get this wrong. Because I'm pretty sure Bill Fagerback was a voice. Wow, man, this is gonna drive me crazy now. It was Brooklyn, Lexington, Bronx. They were all named after like other than Goliath, they were all named after New York
like parts
landmarks.
of New York, Hudson.
Yeah, so I'm trying. So it was something like that. Broadway was his name. Broadway, maybe. I feel like that was maybe a
Statue of Liberty.
Statue of Liberty, Staten Island
raised by the slice,
ozone raised by the slice, like real Brooklyn pizza.
Governor Cuomo, that was another one. I think. But anyway,
Here we go. Show. It's we've got I remember Brent Spiner was on it. Cole Meany, all this. Anyway, let's keep on moving on. I'll get to the bottom of this, but I'm pretty sure that is MO and that spells gargoyles. I'm pretty sure.
Interesting. Well, speaking of people playing a role, now it's time for Zeros and Villains.
I'm gonna have to kill this fucking clown. Welcome to the Losers Club, asshole!
All right, this one's going to be a little bit different because this is, a nonfiction essay, but we do have some characters that find their way in. And I guess, first of all, we should talk about... let's save Stephen King for last. Let's talk about first F. Fitzgerald.
How do you feel about that nickname? And by the way, it was Broadway. It was Bill Fagerback, who plays Tom Cullen, voices Broadway on Gargoyles.
Good. I'm glad we got that.
Yeah. What do you think about that nickname? It's a little too cute by half.
Yeah, obviously it's taken off F. Scott Fitzgerald. This guy was kind of hard to find information, but I found him on Facebook and was able to kind of backtrack. His real name is... Him? No, I reported him, but I poked him. His real name is Richard Minasali, and he's from New York originally, but he started in San Francisco photographing like the punk rock scene. So I think the F-stop just sort of became, his alter ego.
Yeah, that's kind of a thing, right? Yeah, like whatever, Johnny Rotten, Richard Hell, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah,
well, the F-stop isn't very punk rock though. I just think of Full Stop, which sounds very grammatical to me.
That's what I was thinking too, the Full Stop, and I guess he's playing with that. It's just unusual. I don't see a lot of punks embracing like old authors. But yeah, so he's been like, in Rolling Stone, Spin, Village Voice, and he's had a few, galleries go up, and that was kind of how I was able to find him, was these old, tribute galleries that he was doing to his punk rock days. So according to him on his bio, they say that this book has eclipsed 180,000 in sales. So we're getting closer to that 250,000 complete being sold. So who knows? Maybe by now all 250,000 copies of this book have been sold.
And maybe I'm in possession of one of the few. I'm just looking. I'm kind of jealous you found him on Facebook. I'm just looking him up on Instagram and Twitter and all that. There's actually a lot of people who use the handle or the name F. Fitzgerald, so it's probably not one of him.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I know. It's just interesting. Did you look at his non-gargoyle photos, or were they pretty cool?
Yeah, and like we have a lot of friends, and I think we both done some concert photography. So it was, it's good. It stands out as being a little bit above the normal just person with a camera that goes to a concert. But it was more cool, I guess, to see some of the people he was photographing, especially in that scene at that time.
So he was like 70s, like CBGB era kind of thing?
Yeah. And like, like I was like pre-digital cameras, obviously, too. So I feel like there was way, way less photographers back then. Whereas now I feel like everyone with a camera identifies as a photographer. So you see, he's like a skillful concert photographer and definitely made a great career out of this. And it's just sort of an unusual choice that he would stumble into, from photographing people that move on stage to stone creatures that are still alive,
Yeah, when I will say too, I mean, I know I made fun of his name. It was all in good fun. But I like how close up these pictures are too. I feel like usually when I see gargoyle, not that I look at gargoyle photographs all the time, but I feel like there's usually such an effort made to capture the building with it, because usually the building is more famous than the gargoyle, obviously. But I really like with his that he captures them up close to the point that they really do look like monsters. Like, for instance, if you're reading the first edition on page 6, there's this close up of one. It looks almost like a fish mouth or maybe even a Chinese dragon, but he photographs so close up to it. It just looks like it's a creature that exists independently of the building. See, I was a really big fan of the photographs themselves. I thought they were very evocative.
Yeah, and I saw in the coffee table book, you can fold it out. They have certain pages.
Yeah,
there's
a
centerfold.
Let me see what page that's on. It's there's this big centerfold one. You get the nice sound of the pages turning, everyone. That's how you know I'm not fucking with you. Yeah, there's they're in the middle. It's kind of cool. They're more the flat gargoyle faces, so they're not like the demons leaning off the building. They're more just the ones that have the face embedded into it. And it's just a series of them. They almost look like Greek tragedy masks. And then a couple of the outside of the gatefold is in color, and then when you open it, it's black and white. I mean, and it totally makes sense why this is a coffee table book, right? Just because of it is so reliant on photography, and the visuals really are just quite lovely to look at. Did you find them to be especially scary, or were you more just like, oh, these are cool?
So the ones I thought were cool, I actually marked down, and we'll share at the end some of our favorites.
Yeah.
But the ones that are scary to me are the ones that are kind of crumbly. They remind me of, is it the Dwarf King in Return to Oz?
Oh, the Gnome King in Return to Oz. Yeah.
When he's sort of acquiring his human body, but he's not quite there. It's just sort of this rocky, rugged, I don't know, texture that really disturbed me.
Yeah.
So the ones that scared me were not my favorite, but the more like the ugly ones.
Yeah, I rewatched that movie actually this past Thanksgiving at my parents' house. It holds up really, really well. The Wheelers, and I mean, honestly, I feel like we should do an episode on that someday, just because it actually feels like a truly frightening kids movie.
Oh yeah, no, I remember watching that with you once in college, just for fun, randomly. But
yeah, I love it. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's a really good comparison. It really does look like the Gnome King. Well, I think the Gnome King's supposed to be made of limestone or something like that. So he's of a similar material as these gargoyles would be.
Yeah. And let's talk about another character in this book, Mark Glimcher. So I had to do some research on him. He comes across as more of a literary agent in this book, but he's actually a very famous art dealer. And that would make sense why he was, had an office on Madison Avenue. And I was looking up, like, he just made some $20 million sale at Art Basel.
Like recently?
Or Art Basel, yeah.
It's Basel, right? I only know that from
I always say Basel, but
I only know it from rap songs. Like I didn't even. Art Basel's like a. What is it? Like a convention?
It's like the South by Southwest of art dealing, or I remember they sold like a banana taped to the wall. And I love like provocative art, and I think it's funny when people pay a lot for something like that.
Didn't someone eat that banana? That was the thing, right?
Yeah, and I feel like that's the artist making a point also of like kind of pointing out like the Dada absurdity of some of this stuff. But
well, none of it's really permanent, right? Like in a way, it's kind of absurd to put that much value.
No art is permanent, man. If you think about it,
yeah, exactly.
Mona Lisa's ain't gonna last forever.
Yeah.
But Mark Glimcher, so he kind of is the one that recruits Stephen King, and there's some literary agents, but he has a meeting, and you could tell Stephen King's not too sure if this is the project for him. And Mark Glimcher delivers that line where he says, "But hey, well, you'll notice that they're always looking down." His smile was different this time, he thought. And I think the tiniest bit uncomfortable. We don't see them, he said, but they see us. And that's the line that kind of drew Stephen King and like locked him into this project.
So if this were a Stephen King fiction book, he would be responsible for the inciting incident. Like he's the one who, it's equivalent of to sending Ben Mears back to the Marston house, to write or something like that. Yeah, it's
this would not be possible. This whole story without Glimcher.
I always wonder, and don't get me wrong, I prefer the version that Stephen King lays out. But you always wonder, like, oh, did he really say that? Like, did the conversation happen exactly like that? I prefer to think it did, but I would, sometimes that dialogue's a little too neat. Like, I'm trying to think if I've ever had some kind of one-liner in my life that has been that witty and clean. But hey, either way, it makes for good storytelling.
Yeah, no, I wonder as well. But sometimes when you have people that are like this high in society, an art dealer, millionaire, you do wonder if maybe they have that. It's almost like the great car salesman that's just like, see that? I just sold that. Like you don't even know it, but I just sold you that car, and you're like, ooh, like intriguing.
Yeah, he's got to be a pretty smart, savvy guy, and he knew what would get old Uncle Steve to start writing about these creatures.
Rube visiting from Maine, and Stephen King mentions in this that it's about, I think, my guess, about 7-hour drive from Maine to New York City. But King said he would go periodically throughout the year, every few months.
That sounds right. Because I was just at my parents' place this past weekend, and they're in Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania. And I saw a sign for Bangor, Pennsylvania, like Bangor. And I was jokingly saying this, my wife Susan, that, oh, I wonder if that's for Maine. And then I'm like, wait, how far is Maine from here? And they're near New York City. And I think it was like 7.5 hours from them. So 7 hours sounds right.
Yeah, it's about 600 miles or so. Yeah. But anyway, so he would be coming to town and periodically, imagine meeting with his publishers, literary agents, movie agents, all those kind of things. I don't imagine tons of people are flying out to Maine. It's probably just a lot easier to take a long weekend and go to the Big Apple.
Yeah, and from from what he says in his own writing, I think he's big on road trips by himself. Taking the hog out or taking
just listen to some rock and roll and
Blair some Chuck Berry and drive to the city. I actually do. It's funny because the essay obviously is about gargoyles and he talks about why they're horrific to him, which we've already gone over. But it does actually feel like a fish out of water story a little bit, even though Stephen King's been to New York a bunch of times by this point. I think because he was just raised working class and in a more rural environment, it does feel like, a country boy coming to the big city and getting scared by gargoyles, which makes the essay really interesting. I think that's a much more interesting framing device than if he was some Renaissance scholar talking about their architectural features and where those all come from.
Yeah, no, I the type. And we should mention, like, I'm from Long Island originally. Caffrey's from Jersey. So we grew up pretty close to New York City. So we've spent a lot of time there and have a lot of family there. But even now, having not lived there in a long time, when I, get off the plane sometimes, there's that overwhelming sense of like, oh man, I don't, and over my head a little bit.
Dude. Yeah. The reason I was up north was for a wedding in New York City. Now that we're all vaccinated, my friend who was getting married picked us up at my sister's house in New Jersey. And, I consider myself a pretty decent driver and I don't get too intimidated, but he drove us from Jersey, like through the Lincoln Tunnel into Manhattan and then into Brooklyn. And I kept thinking the whole time, oh, I don't know if I could do what he's doing. And he accidentally turned, he was in the right turn only lane on like, I want to say 6th Avenue or something. And so he actually had to turn back into the Lincoln Tunnel by accident. So we went into the Lincoln Tunnel 3 times trying to get into the city. And it just like, it does feel like this different beast almost. And even, we've both lived in Chicago, or still live in Chicago, but we've both spent a lot of time in Chicago, and even Chicago feeling like this big, sometimes menacing, wonderful city. I think New York is just that times 1,000. Even though Chicago is like the 3rd biggest city in the U.S., New York just feels so much bigger and more towering. Which maybe also feeds into the fear factor of the gargoyles and looking up at them. And to be fair, even though we were kind of making fun of him a minute ago, I've never walked down New York streets or Chicago streets and looked up to look for gargoyles other than when I was on the train. So for all I know, maybe it is really, really freaky if you're walking on Madison Avenue and you look up and see some impish monkey god with wings staring down at you.
Yeah, and I guess that we should talk then about Mr. Stephen King, who I guess would be the main character of this essay.
The hero of the story.
The hero, the protagonist, the hero, the one we're rooting for in this essay. And basically, so he's still reticent about whether he wants to take this project on or not. He doesn't really know, as someone who's not super familiar with gargoyles, what he can bring to the table. But what he does is after Glimcher mentions that they're always there looking down on us, he goes and he starts walking down the street and just keeps, is looking up. And he starts counting and noticing how many gargoyles he actually passes on the way back to his hotel. And then the next day, he actually rents a limo and he gets a scrap of paper and he starts checking every time he sees a gargoyle. And I think he gets to over 100 on the limo trip.
Yeah,
right?
he exceeds a lot of them. I mean, they really are everywhere once you start looking for them. I even think, too, it's funny because they're not in the book, but at the Harold Washington Library in Chicago, they have some. They actually have owls at the top of the building, too, which I don't know if those are technically gargoyles, but I do. You watch that show Invincible, right? The superhero show?
Yeah.
I've only read the comic, but so I don't know if this line is in the show or not, but they talk a lot about how there's like villains who are able to sneak up on people because they're flying, and it's as simple as people never look up. It's what Stephen King says, right? So I don't know if they say that in the show, but yeah, that's what I kept thinking of.
I will say the Harold Washington Library also has these light fixtures that look like the mask of Sauron, which I love.
Yeah.
Every time it's a big Chicago library, the train goes right by it, but it's scary. It's kind of like gothic.
That's a really good point. I never. You're talking about the kind of. I always thought they looked like lanterns that are, where the metal frame is bent outward because it's like sharp almost. But you're right, it totally does look like the mask.
They're kind of like the ring wraith, like some of a little bit like that. Like
the way their arm, the way their the armor on their gauntlets look like the kind of bent silver. Yeah. I mean,
pearls and spikes.
That's totally true. Now I'm gonna only see that when I look at that the mask of Sauron.
Oh yeah, you can't miss it. It's awesome. But so Steven, so he's he goes down the street and he basically is like, wow, there are a ton, and then he meets up with his friend Jerry. Jerry in quotes because he doesn't want to reveal the actual name of his close friend because he says, you don't have many that you've known your whole life, and Jerry's one of them. So you get the impression that, Jerry's kind of a sounding board that he maybe bounces ideas off of. And, he says Jerry's not from New York originally, but even the fact that Jerry is a transplant and has only been there for a little while, as soon as he mentions gargoyles, Jerry's like, oh yeah, you got to go down this street, go down that street. And he starts pointing out all these gargoyles that most people just would never think about.
What if Jerry's, I know he's trying to keep him anonymous and stuff. What if Jerry's just like George Romero or something? Someone like super famous.
Oh yeah. Or like Jerry Seinfeld. He's like, Steven.
Yeah, he's the one that knows Steven.
You got to get the gargoyles.
I know we talked about Kramer in the coffee book. I feel like Seinfeld better than I did. Was there ever any Stephen King overlap on Seinfeld?
Oh, that's a good question.
Or did they ever like reference him,
I've been rewatching him during quarantine, but I don't know that there's a Stephen King. There's not too many horror references. There's a lot of drama movie references with like Rochelle, a woman's erotic journey.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's Schindler's List is in the movie or in the show, but I don't know that there's been a lot of Stephen King references, which is kind of surprising because they reference a lot of pop culture in Seinfeld.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say because I feel like they reference Superman a lot. And they reference like Kenny Rogers Roasters, all these things. I feel like Stephen King has to come up at some point. But yeah, it's interesting with Jerry. Yeah, I kept wondering if Jerry was like a famous person or just someone who he was known from New York for a long time.
I think it's probably one of his buddies from school or back in the day. He might have mentioned even in the story how they know each other, but just a lifelong friend, someone that is not going to buy into the Stephen King hoopla and still see him as just Stevie.
Mm-hmm. Old Stevie. I always call him Uncle Steve. I don't know if he ever refers himself as that, but that's what I always say.
I always like the term. I think that's a term of respect for like an older uncle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, or just an old storyteller. That's why.
I just found out recently too. I was watching Jeopardy, and Tijuana is actually Aunt Juan or Aunt Jane in Spanish, and I never thought about that.
Oh, really? Oh, I guess that would be. Oh, yeah, Tia Juana. That makes total sense. Oh, that's super interesting.
So all the Tios and Tios out there, we love you.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, yeah, my niece's name is Jane, so she's like the opposite of an aunt. She's my niece, but yeah, that's it. Yeah, Tia Juana. That's super interesting. Something we should. We'll go into depth in it a little bit. But so we mentioned this 1972 movie Gargoyles, which is essentially kind of a Saturday afternoon made for TV cheap horror movie from the 70s. And he actually talks about that informing his decision to finally write about the book and informing the horror of the gargoyles. Specifically, his son. It's Joe, right? It's Joe Hill. He's referring to
Joe Hill.
So his son Joe Hill is obsessed with this movie as a little kid. And Stephen King kind of makes fun of the movie and talks about it being corny a little bit. But then he also talks about a couple really iconic scenes in the movie that actually do manage to strike fear in his heart. And he keeps coming back to that. And that's what also plays a big part in eventually moving him to write about gargoyles. Like I said, we'll get to the movie.
I think that's a good time to kick into it because we've covered all the characters.
Don't worry, Mom. I know all about cannibalism. I saw it on TV.
See? It's okay. You saw it on the television.
You know, like we said, there's a little unconventional this episode, but we're going to talk about. So this is the movie, like you said, the made-for-TV film, which Dan and I both watched. I know you've seen it before, but I watched it just in preparation. And it's it's kind of a low-budget, cheesy, as you'd imagine a made-for-TV horror movie would be. But there is something about it that does stand out as being very disturbing. The monsters, the way they interact with the humans, it is definitely creepier than it deserves to be.
Yeah.
So when was the first time you saw this?
I saw this movie first when I was about 7, I think. I remember my dad and I were in probably like a Sam Goody or a Peaches or one of the stores that you would have in the mall back then, Camelot Music maybe. And he saw it on VHS and he was like, "Oh, this is this pretty freaky movie from when I was not a little kid." Well, no, I guess so. Yeah, my dad would have been 11 or 12, I think, when this movie came out. And he told me that Stan Winston had done the effects for it, who, of course, Stan Winston would go on to do Jurassic Park and Terminator 2, a gnome named Norm, to name a few.
I think it did win a Primetime Emmy for achievement in makeup.
It did, yeah. And so it's funny because, of course, by today's standards, these are definitely people in gargoyle suits for sure. But at the same time, like you said, I don't mean to be a broken record because I feel like we talk about this a lot on this and Halloweenies, but there is something to be said about it not being CGI, right? About them. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's suits. And if they're in the daylight a little bit too long, maybe they look kind of corny, but they are actually there. And if they're lit right, it does just have a certain amount of horror about it. And it's something that the human actors can talk to, right? That can interact with. And the scene that Stephen King specifically references is, we should back up a little bit. The plot of the movie is essentially that it's funny. There's this opening narration that has all these just over like paintings of gargoyles, essentially saying this narrative that gargoyles were essentially Satan's little helpers in the battle between heaven and hell. Which I don't know if the movie made that up or if that has any relation to what gargoyles actually are from an architectural standpoint. But they sided with the devil and that he cast them on earth to rule. But of course, man has wiped them out time and time again. So the central plot of the movie is that this father and his daughter are going on this exhibition, and is it New Mexico it takes place in, right? Am I right on that?
Yes.
So they're in New Mexico, and he writes about like statues and just fantastical beings in architecture. And they find that they get introduced to a skeleton that's been dug up by this crazy local guy. And they view it as evidence that, okay, maybe gargoyles actually still exist here. They don't even go into really that they're stone creatures come to life. It's more like the stone creatures are imitations of what these monsters are. And what they're trying to do for the whole movie is just give birth so that their race can replenish. And the scene that Stephen King talks about specifically as being scary is at the end of the movie, we see little baby gargoyles hatch out of these giant eggs. And he talks about Joe Hill wanting to watch that over and over and over again. And Stephen King actually being kind of freaked out by it. And I'm guessing they use little kids or something, but the makeup effects are pretty good there. They're like slimy and they have these little wings and everything like that. What did you think about that scene specifically?
Oh, yeah, no, it definitely bothered me as well. I was saying it's weird because I watched Mandy over the weekend.
Oh, yeah.
This movie actually has some root that reminds me of Mandy. Just with like the weird bikers that Nicolas Cage is confronting, and then you see like these weird costumed gargoyles that the character in this is having to deal with. Dr.
Yeah,
Boley.
there's also too, because I've only seen Mandy once, but from what I remember, there's a lot of slow motion too, right? That like aren't a lot of the action scenes very drawn out, and Gargoyles does this as well. And I honestly think for Gargoyles, they kind of put it in shutter speed just because it looks a little better at night, like they can kind of get away with how they
I also read that they filmed this entire movie with only one camera.
Oh, really? Oh, that's super
it's kind of funny because it's, we've made movies with one camera before as like indie, amateur
like
filmmakers.
High schoolers. Yeah.
But not for major TV film. And we should say, so Cornell Wilde, who plays the main character, he's actually
dad,
kind of a famous, he's there with his daughter, which at the beginning I thought it might have been like a professor with his, apprentice, but I was actually happy to see that it was just his daughter. But he's a noted director. He actually made this movie, he wrote, directed, started in 1965 called The Naked Prey, which my dad made me watch when I was little. I just loved it. And it's essentially like 1800s South Africa. This group is going on safari. They offend these villagers. And the villagers, it's almost like a Green Inferno or a Cannibal Holocaust. They start executing all the members of the safari, and then they take Cornel West's character and they strip him naked and they shoot an arrow and they say, run to that arrow, and as soon as you cross it, we're going to send a hunter. And then once that hunter crosses it, we're going to send another hunter. So they send about a dozen guys after him. So it's largely a movie with very little dialogue. It's just him running. It's kind of like The Most Dangerous Game or Surviving the Game. It's very good though. It has like a great payoff in the end.
Yeah, there's a very specific aesthetic about the the Saturday afternoon movie. And King talks about like, yeah, there's some stiff acting and whatnot, maybe some corny music, but I feel like they do. I don't know. I like the grittiness of them a little bit. Like it looks a little cheap in a way that makes it feel somehow more authentic than what you would usually see on network TV today. What was that one called again? The Prey one?
The Naked Prey.
I'll have to watch that. Yeah, because he's naked the whole time and he's having to cross these.
Yeah, it's a very like. I remember they kill this one guy. They dip him in clay and then they let it harden and then they put him on a spit like rotisserie and then like one guy they tie him down to the ground on his stomach, but they tie his head back and they throw a cobra in front of him, and just some very creative executions in that movie.
Yeah, it does sound very, very similar to Cannibal Holocaust. I mean, I'm sure it's not as graphic as Cannibal Holocaust or anything, right? But
yeah,
but
it was funny. So, in part of the essay that King gets into is just again showing this to his son and being like, is this appropriate for him? And even knowing it's cheesy, the fact that his son does get scared but still can't look away and keeps going back, and I think that's the idea of some of these gargoyles that we might kind of just pass them by and not even notice. But then when you take the time to actually sit down and think about them, you're never going to be able to walk by a gargoyle without looking up at it again and getting a little creeped out.
Well, and especially too the tied to the movie. I mean, the design of the creatures, even though when they move, sometimes it looks pretty rubbery or you can see the wrinkles. The design is really good. I mean, they're very reptilian. They have these beaks. They even have a flying scene at the end. Bernie Casey, who's a famous blaxploitation actor, I think a football player, he has to, well, I'm not gonna spoil what he does, but he flies away at the end, to say the least. And yeah, you can, the wings move very slow and it's probably just done with a rod or a rope or whatever, but still they figured out some way to do that, which is really cool. And you mentioned the biker gang too. Yeah, you see a very young Scott Glennon there, who of course would go on to play Pangborn later on in the King universe. Yeah, he plays kind of like a hunky biker who I do think it's a little corny how the bikers just decide to help them out because the daughter's nice to them, and he ends up like one of them ends up sacrificing themselves at the end in a way that I was like, oh wow, that's a pretty big move to make for these two people you just met.
Hey, bikers get a bad rap, but
yeah, they're just good guys. Yeah, it's
misunderstood.
Gargoyles is definitely worth checking out, though, and it's on Tubi if anyone wants to check it out. And also, too, there's just not much fiction made. I can't think of many fictional narratives about gargoyles. We mentioned the Disney show. Obviously, there's this movie. There is a gargoyle in one of the installments of Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, which does have King ties to it also. But other than that, I can't really think of a ton of fiction where gargoyles play a big part. So I just kind of like that it exists. So yeah, I mean, it's like 70 minutes, it's definitely worth seeking out on Tubi. And like King says, that birth scene is really freaky. I get really freaked out by the scene where the gargoyles invade the hotel room to try and get this skeleton of their dead brethren back. When the gargoyles are in the dark and they're not moving around too much, they actually look quite freaky.
Yeah, no, and it's like you can also watch this on YouTube for free. It's funny because it goes back to kind of King's argument. So I was trying to think of horror movies that have gargoyles, and a lot do, but they're just set decoration, right? They just kind of add to the mood. They're never the main focus.
Yeah, they're just like in castles and things.
Right, and I think that's what goes to King's thing of like you may not even notice them, but they notice you. And looking back, almost every horror movie period piece is going to have an old building with gargoyles on it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I just thought one more example. Hey, tying back to Seinfeld again, because that's what we do on this podcast. Hunchback of Notre Dame, you see they're like the cartoon gargoyles. One of them is voiced by Jason Alexander. Yeah, but like I said, they're not going to scare you so much. They're more of the comic relief.
Quasimodo! Trying to think Jason. Yeah. Just like, that's it, Quasi!
Yeah, he probably does say something like that.
Boom. Okay, and that brings us to the next section, which is misery.
She died. She just slipped away.
Slipped away! Slipped away! He didn't just slip away! You did it! 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 You murdered my misery!
Penny.
All right, this is Misery. These are just some of the parts we didn't like, and I don't think there's much here to critique overall. I enjoy this essay. I think it's worth checking out. It's a quick read. I guess my only thing is the way that it's sort of laid out within the book. It's literally the first 35, 40 pages are the essay, and then the rest is just pictures. And I wouldn't mind the essays being broken up, I guess, across different sections of the book so that there's always something to read. Because once you're done reading it, it's just looking at photos.
Yeah, that's a good
I think
point.
I would have slowed down maybe and appreciated photos more if there were some literary breaks. Then a few pages of photos, then some literary breaks.
That's a good point. I actually thought that's how it was going to be structured. Much like the Madonna sex coffee table book, which just has her quotes about sex interspersed throughout. No, but yeah, I really thought it was going to be, because you could, I think, take any bit of his writing and pepper it throughout and it would make sense. Yeah, I guess, this is such a minor quibble. And I usually have this complaint about most King introductions or essays. I feel like he always goes out of his way to kind of take critics down a peg or two. Now, I'm not saying this because we are critics. We're all writers too. So it's not like I'm like, oh, King can't have anything bad to say about critics. That's not fair. It's more that he just always does it. And I feel like he does this kind of self-deprecating thing where he acts like, oh, he's maybe not seen as being academic or highbrow enough for critics, which I understand to an extent, but also, he's won like the O. Henry Award by this point. He's written films or books that have been adapted into Academy Award winning films. And so it's just funny. I just noticed that every time he has any kind of essay in the front of one of his books, he always just like talks a little bit about like critics being almost like the plebeians of the artistic world, if that makes sense. Like they don't quite get it.
I have a great quote that I was going to put. He says, "We'll leave the questions of divinity for the critics, those Jesuits of the artistic sphere."
That's what he says. Yeah, there's Jesuits, and I guess my problem too, and I've talked about this on the podcast before. And hey, Stephen, we love you, of course, but he always talks. I feel like he looks down sometimes on analysis. Like he famously clashed with Stanley Kubrick in The Shining, and I think he said Stanley is a man who thinks too much and feels too little, which that's a valid criticism of Stanley Kubrick, of course. But then I think someone had the opposite criticism of Stephen King, where he's a man who feels too much and thinks too little. And I would argue that Stephen King actually is very analytical, and he's super intelligent and does think out all of his stories in this really remarkable kind of way. But yeah, I feel like whenever he talks about critics, it's almost like he doesn't like that they're trying to intellectualize something. Whereas I'm like, I understand you can definitely overanalyze something to where it doesn't become fun anymore, or to the point where you misinterpret it. But I don't think there's anything wrong with intellectualizing any art. I think that's why I like absorbing art, because I like to talk about it. I like to think about what it means. I like to analyze it, think about all the ways it could be interpreted, especially with Stephen King's works. That's why we have a podcast where we go 4 hours sometimes, right? And so yeah, the quote you just pulled about the Jesuits, like, oh, they're such assholes for wanting to think about things like God or whatever. I don't know. It just seems a little.
It's funny because the most I know about Jesuits is Hunter S. Thompson used to love debating them.
Oh, really?
And he's like, there's nothing more fun than debating a mean Jesuit. So
well,
I guess like Jesuits very strict.
Maybe he means it because I guess Jesuits are like priests, right? Or are they? It's
its own religion, I believe. But it's like a stricter form of Catholicism. I'm not.
It's just so funny, man. I don't think he's done it in a while, but I just feel like there's a stretch, especially in the 80s and 90s, where every time he has some kind of essay, he always has some line about critics. And honestly, aside from my disagreeing with him about it, I think it just also seems like a repetitive trick, like he just always kind of does it. So I get a little tired of it.
I think it's like with if you get sick of hearing critiques of your stuff, or that you're not a real whatever from critics, it's like celebrities that get sick from like paparazzi and people misinterpreting their words online, so that when you get interviewed and, celebrities like bitter of like, these people online, and I'm like, I'm just a fan. I don't follow that stuff,
totally.
But it's front and center in their mind, whereas it may not be for most fans. So, I don't know that most Stephen King readers are going and reading the critiques of his stuff either.
No, totally.
But, it's front and center in his mind sometimes.
He's had a lot of critical success too. But to be fair, in the 70s especially, he was kind of looked at as being this one-trick pony horror writer, and I actually think he's not that at all. I think he's
like Harold Bloom or something.
Okay, and Harold Bloom is does seem like a total asshole. I mean, I kind of
He seems like a genius as well, but also an
exactly,
asshole.
yeah. I mean, I kind of love Harold Bloom too because there's no one else quite like him, and he goes so hard and is probably you know what, Harold Bloom probably is a Jesuit of the artistic, you know, like that description probably does accurately apply to him.
He was like the most, you know, he's a professor at Yale. He's held up for anyone that hasn't read his stuff, but he's like a very famous, like professorial, one of the most famous like English literature critics.
It's always funny.
He kind of knew it, you know, the way he behaved.
It's always funny because his essays, you know, he's written about Stephen King and J.K. Rowling and whoever else, and he always writes about it like the fact that people like them or enjoy them, it's like the end of the world or something. He always writes like, "Oh, I'm lamenting," and it's just so funny. I'm like, dude, I don't think anyone has a problem with people liking popular literature except you. But like you said, he is kind of one of a kind, you know, and probably a little bit of a genius, also probably a little bit of a troll. I think he's got to be old by now too, right?
I don't know if he's alive. I just remember he was a big Cormac McCarthy fan.
I do like Cormac McCarthy. Yeah,
but no, yeah, actually, Harold Bloom died in 2019. So
oh, did he really? I didn't know that. Yeah, how old was he?
Rest in peace, Sweet Prince.
Yeah, 89. I mean, that's a good run.
It's pretty good. I mean, that's not exactly, you know, working in a coal mine your whole life. You're reading books, so it's like I think 89 is a ripe old age. You know, oh, another paper cut. Damn, workman's comp.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, it's like, I think somewhere's the truth is probably in the middle of what Harold Bloom thinks and what Stephen King thinks.
Yeah, that's a great segue. But yeah, so I think we covered. There's not a whole lot we didn't like in this.
Yeah, no, overall for what this is, I think it's actually quite a wonderful essay, and I, like I said, enjoy the photos. Should we talk about a minute, maybe like what? Do you have any individual gargoyles that you really enjoyed? I know you said you sort of like the crumbling ones, but do any individual ones stick out to you?
Yeah, I think, why don't we segue that into the cemetery?
What's the bottom of the truth?
Well, sometimes that is better. The person you put up there ain't the person that comes back. It may look like that person, but it ain't that person. Because whatever lives in the ground beyond that cemetery ain't human at all.
Welcome to the cemetery. Again, this is going to be a little bit of a different episode, but I think we're going to talk now about some of the scarier, more disturbing, downright favorite gargoyles that we saw. Caffrey, would you like to go first, or any gargoyles that stood out to you in the pictures?
Absolutely. So apologies if I'm taking one of yours, but and like I said, there are a lot of gargoyles from Chicago, some of which I have recognized from just riding the train. You can see them, but my favorite one was, if anyone's been to the Chicago Theater, which has this very famous marquee, it's very elaborate in detail. It's kind of red, blue, and yellow. It lights up. It's very famous. I didn't know this. There are tons of gargoyles almost around the border of the sign. And just because I lived in Chicago over a decade, I've gone in the Chicago Theater a bunch. I've taken the train by it. I've walked by it. I've looked at that marquee hundreds, if not thousands of times. I never noticed the gargoyles there. And to King's point about you're not watching that, but they're watching you, or I guess his friend or the art dealer's point, just seeing that those over the Chicago Theater sign freaked me out because I had never noticed them before. It kind of reminds me of, in It, where they're looking at the old photos and they notice that Pennywise is there for the first time. And the fact that I've seen these things so many times, they've never caught my attention. And I Googled it just to make sure that it wasn't doctored and that there are indeed gargoyles surrounding the Chicago Theater sign. And of course there were. That did give me a little bit of a chill just because I hadn't seen it before. So that would be my personal favorite. I also like the monkey ones too. I just thought they were fun. But what about you?
Yeah, no, I actually noticed those as well. Like I listed a lot of the Chicago ones. And again, I used to work right by the Chicago Theater. That was my train stop on Lake that I got off on every day, which is right in front of the theater, and just never noticed it. Going back next time I'm there, I'm definitely going to.
I was going to say, have you gone by there at all during the pandemic or not?
No, I haven't really traveled downtown in a little while, which just, things are a little bit different, but I'm sure once I get going again. But I actually did notice the part of Chicago I live in, which is more of the neighborhood. There are definitely some old buildings that have the gargoyle effects in the corner. Those I have noticed.
Does yours have one? You live in kind of a cool old apartment building?
Yeah, my building's from 1910, but it's pretty straightforward brick square.
Yeah, not quite.
Nothing
enough.
too exciting.
It's probably not,
but
because I guess gargoyles are going to be reserved for really, really, really tall buildings too. So yeah, next time I'm in Chicago,
it's an interesting thing too because in college my roommate was an architecture major and mutual friend with Dan Caffrey, our friend Mike, who's an architect, and he would talk about too how sometimes the designers can get a little bored and they just want to add a little touch. So they'll, I think historically there was a lot of that going on of, it's like when a chef is making the special at a restaurant, they put a little extra effort into garnishing it and making it fancy because it's like, oh, I don't always get the chance to do this. So I get the impression that some of the mason workers, the gargoyles were that for them. It was a little bit of a, hey, now I get to be a little fancy.
I love the idea of just like, the mason who didn't design the building. He's like, I'm just going to throw a horned demon on this, and it's going to be really cool.
And it's funny too because like you've traveled to Europe, outside the churches, they'll have these statues that are supposed to be like a vagrant or a homeless person. It's like a hooded figure, and it's very scary. But they're all over Europe and Eastern Europe. And when I was there, I was just like, wow, this seems so out of place next to a church. But then I'm like, you know what? I guess if gargoyles are adorning buildings and churches, you almost have to have that little bit of scary with the sweetness,
Yeah, no,
sugar with the spice.
yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite gargoyles, I think it's page 110. It looks like a dragon that is being choked by a boa constrictor.
Well, let me open this up.
So I can't tell if this is supposed to be like a serpentine dragon body or if it's a snake wrapping around it. But I think it's a really cool.
I almost knocked over my wine glass. I was so scared. Let me see. Okay.
Man.
Oh, that is cool. Oh, that's wild. Yeah, it almost looks like, well, because there is a gutter in this particular gargoyle's mouth. Yeah, it almost looks like the snake is choking the water out of it. Yeah, I can't tell if that's its head or not.
Asian feel, like there's like an Asian aesthetic to that one.
You know what? I could be wrong. This might be the one I was talking about earlier on that looks like the fish or the Chinese dragon close up. I wonder if that's just a close up. But something that's cool about this book is in the back is it lists where all the locations are. So I can I'll look once we're off the phone just to see if that's true. There's also around that page 118 and 119. There's one that's an angel, and its mouth is opened to a kind of inhuman size. I'm guessing that's where the water is. It looks like it's singing or shouting, but just its mouth being so wide is freaky. And then right next to it, there's looks like a demon with a dagger in its head, but it's making a funny face. I think that I like the ones that have these really active things going on, similar to the snake one you just pointed out.
Because I would put on page 88, this one looks almost like an Art Deco. It looks like a human that has like a veiled face. It reminds me of something that would be in like that movie, like what, Cosmopolitan or
Metropolis.
Metropolis, yeah. I'm confusing it with the comic, but yeah, it has like this weird, like, I don't know. It's like a modern human, but with like an ancient. I don't know, like Gustav Klimt.
You mentioned H.R. Geiger before. It's almost something that looks like it could be in that too. I'm trying to.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of because I was thinking a lot about Geiger, and I think there's something that Geiger captures in a lot of his sculptures, that sort of pained expression.
Yeah,
and I think that's what makes these very scary. Is a lot of them they look like they're screaming, or you think of like when Medusa's cave, where these people are sort of caught in this moment of agony. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes some of these so scary.
there is one. It almost looks like a little possum or some little marsupial rodent creature who's clutching a pine cone. It's like the one time there's like a really cute little gargoyle in there too. So I like that we get a little bit of that mixture.
And then I'll do one more that I find very funny, and it is on page 95.
Let me see.
And I can't tell if this is like a soldier or a messenger, but it looks like it's wearing a fireman's hat. And it just was cracking me up.
If any of, like I said, constant listeners, you're getting to hear the effects of me turning the page. So oh, that is really cool.
But it looks like it has a 31 on its cap. And it's
I can't tell. That's it could be a fire helmet, or it could be almost like a.
Because it looks like he has a hose in his left hand too.
Huh? That's wild. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it is a fire. Yeah, I think you're right. It's a fire for a fire station. It looks like because the hose and the helmet, it's probably over a firehouse protecting or something. And that's what's interesting because, like I said, I really do think of gargoyles more as being winged creatures, but I think the only criteria really is that they have to be made of stone on a building and have a pipe coming out of its gullet. And that little marsupial one is on page 62. Yeah, it's a little cute guy. He's hanging onto a pine cone. It looks. I think it looks like a possum or something like that, or maybe it's just supposed to be some mythological creature.
Yeah, it's a cute guy, but
Yeah, he's a cute little guy.
So any others that you want to call out, or are we ready to move on?
No, I think that's good. Yeah, let's go on to the next section.
All right. Well, the next section is not going to be long, but we need to cover it. It's King's Dominion.
There's another world out there. I know there is.
Welcome to King's Dominion. This is references to other King works. I don't think there's too many here, but Dan did notice one earlier.
Yeah, but we have obviously. Well, it's funny. This one probably doesn't even count. I was gonna say, okay, well, there's the Disney show Gargoyles, which has Bill Fitzgerald back, who voiced Tom Cullen, but that's not really connected to this book at all. But Scott Glenn, obviously, playing Sheriff Alan Pangborn in the Castle Rock miniseries. You could count that Tales from the Dark Side one, maybe just because one of those tales is inspired by Stephen King's story. But there's a gargoyle in it. But there's nothing like, I don't even know. I didn't even check for this. Does he even mention any of his other books in the opening? I don't think he does.
I don't think he does either. No, I was really searching because I love trying to connect him to the Dark Tower any way I can, even if I have to do backflips to do it. But I could not do it on this one.
Yeah, and I was trying to think too if any of his other books have gargoyles in them, like as like in it, Pennywise never turns into a gargoyle or anything like that. Yes, I didn't have much. I mean, really, the Scott Glenn being in the Gargoyles movie that Stephen King talks about in the introduction, that's pretty much all I could think of. I mean, the Stan Winston did the effects on that movie, and this came up the other day. We were trying to think of if Stan Winston had ever worked on a Stephen King film. I don't think he has. I hope. I feel like a listener is going to point out that we're totally wrong about this, or that there's some big glaring error that we missed. But yeah, I don't think so. So yeah, I think it's just going to be a pretty short category, as King's Dominion tends to be. I'm trying to think, was there any I know Mac always likes to call it Room 237, where he has some really far-fetched theory about how something could connect, but I really couldn't.
No, I usually do, but just one thing on the Stan Winston, there's the fun fact that I didn't get to mention, but so there actually was some controversy when he was doing the makeup, because I guess at the time he was sort of the third man on the totem pole. He wasn't exactly the lead makeup.
Oh, so he wasn't even
artist.
heading it up. Yeah.
So at the time, I guess they like sort of fought for his name to be on there, and I guess when the Emmy was given out, he's the one who they said took it home, but he didn't necessarily feel that he had contributed in the way that they tried to cast him in later years. And I guess when this came out on DVD or VHS, Stan Winston's name was prominently featured in letters because he's probably the only, one of the only famous
I want to say that the VHS I had, it had a big blown up image of the female gargoyles, the matriarch gargoyles head. I think it did say Stan Winston's Gargoyles or something like that. Yeah, I'm just looking at this Tales from the Dark Side movie. So that has an adaptation of The Cat from Hell in it, which is by Stephen King. But the story that the gargoyle is in, I think, is called Lover's Vow, and that's by Michael McDowell. But I mean, that's the only King adjacent property I can think of that has a gargoyle. So yeah, just not a ton in here. I mean, and let's be real, the effects. I mean, the effects are a big selling point of Gargoyles. So I understand why they want to capitalize a little bit on old Stan Winston.
Yeah, and I think too, just this book is more of a, other than like on writing, it's just kind of a peer inside what the thought process is for Stephen King accepting a project, how he approaches it.
Yeah,
and when this one, how he turns that into the narrative itself.
And he has he has these kind of anomaly projects in his career. Some of the essays he's done, the on writing book, this, and I like that that's sprinkled throughout his career as primarily a horror writer. And I just think it's good to, I think it's good to tackle a diversity of projects, and Stephen King certainly has done that as he's gotten older.
Exactly. Okay, and I guess that brings us to our final section, which is final thoughts.
Dad, can we go now?
You ready?
Yeah, we've been ready for an hour.
Okay, I'll be right there.
You said that a half hour ago.
Yeah, my dad's weird. He gets like that when he's writing.
Welcome to Final Thoughts, all you gargoyles. I'm realizing now that my intro, when I said gargoyles, it's from the God Warrior, if you remember.
What's the God Warrior?
It was a viral video of like this spouse swap reality show. And there's this very religious woman, and they swapped her with like a house of like pagans. And when she went back to her family, she's like, there were gargoyles, demons. She's like, I needed prayer.
I have seen that episode. I remember the religious woman coming back. She says gargoyles. I'll have to rewatch that.
Give it up for God. I'm a God warrior. She's like, I needed prayer. Mama, I did pray for you. You did come to my mind. But yeah, she says gargoyles.
I'm going to have to look that up.
So these are our final thoughts on this book, which, I guess I'll go first to kick it off. It's an unconventional book, but I like when people take on different projects. I had a good time reading this. It's not a topic I thought a lot about, but I will be thinking about going forward. It felt like the letter to the constant reader at the beginning or end of a Stephen King book, the way he kind of spoke in this like one-on-one sense and gave you some insight into what he was thinking about. I thought the pictures were great. Very scary. F. Fitzgerald did a good job. I'd actually be interested in checking out some more of his stuff. As I mentioned, I looked at some of his punk rock stuff, but I wonder if there's more still lifes that he captures because he does a really good job. And if you live in a big city or near churches, I think it's worth looking up sometimes and noticing the things that are looking down. You don't always notice these, but they are there and they are watching. I for one, will get a stiff neck because I think I'll be looking up more as I go down the streets. So for those reasons, I give this 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses.
I think I'm also going to go with 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses. Like I said, aside from that little critic jab and maybe the structure of the book a little bit where we wanted to see some text accompanying the pictures, I can't really complain about anything in this. I think it does exactly what it sets out to do. It has some really, really evocative photos accompanied by another great essay by Stephen King. And to what you just said, I'm definitely going to look up a little bit more once I'm walking by buildings that might have this. That being said, do I want to give it the same rating that I give it? I'd probably not, just because it's I know this is the most pretentious sounding phrase, but it's like minor King a little bit.
Okay, Harold.
Yeah,
Bloom.
I know. I'm a real Harold Bloom over here. I remember his voice is very low. His voice is kind of soothing, actually. Harold Bloom.
He reminds me of like Marlon Brando.
Yeah, it's very low. Yeah, like I'm not gonna try and do. I'm gonna respect his memory. So I'll also give it 4 bright red Pennywise clown noses. I like that it exists. I think it's a very fascinating anomaly in the Stephen King canon, and everyone should check it out. It's a short read, and then you get hours and maybe years of enjoyment from the photos themselves. Keep it on your coffee table. It makes a great conversation starter.
It's a spooky coffee table book.
Yeah,
a great conversation starter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's thanks for joining us for this little bit of an unusual episode. We would love to see some pictures of gargoyles near you, or maybe some of your favorites from the book. So hit us up at the Twitter at the Losers Club Pod, at Instagram at the Losers Club Podcast. Let us know if your town is haunted by these silent observers. Dan, where can we find you?
You can find me, as always, DW Caffrey on both Twitter and Instagram, or check out my website, dancaffreywrites.com. Where can we find you?
Dan Pfleegor, up our most social handles. Nothing too exciting going on, but I do post some funny photos sometimes.
Yeah.
And you can check out some more Losers Club podcast on the Bloody Disgusting Podcast Network. We have some really cool stuff coming up as we segue into the summer, including some surprises. So keep your eyes out.
Yeah, and maybe some recording in the same room again at some point. We'll see. Now that vaccines
I look forward to it. Very spooky. But until then, I guess all we have to say is long days and pleasant nights.
That's easier with 2 people. All right. See you next time.
Bye.
I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. I got some hot friends. God, I got some hot friends. But you know you want somebody to treat you good.
This is the end of our show. For now. We hope you enjoyed this production. If you like our programming, consider searching for other Bloody Disgusting podcasts, such as Creepy, Horror Queers, The Boo Crew, SCP Archives, Nightlight, Margaret's Garden, and more.